Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Professor Dr. Muhammad Tajuddin bin Muhammad Rasdi. Today I would like to give my comments on the issue of the enhancement of the Imam Nawawi's 40 Hadiths that has caused some stir in the Malaysian society. Now, the issue came up when the Ministry of Education had announced the introduction, which is actually not an introduction, an enhancement of the teaching of Imam Nawawi's 40 Hadith. And this has caused great concern, especially among the non-Muslim community. There were 2 points in which the non-Muslim community were concerned with. Number one, it is seen as an act of strengthening Islam or over-strengthening Islam in the public schools. Many non-Muslim citizens of Malaysians are very concerned about the rising tide of conservatism as well as extremism of Islam in this country, and rightfully so. We can see one coalition of politics using that to gain massive votes in the previous elections. And the frightening thing for me is not that the politicians are saying this, but that there have been so much support from the Muslim community, the Malays. So the reaction of the government seems to be, to many non-Muslim, is that Anwar is trying to out-Islamize or out-Islam the other party, and so this caused the concern that eventually the public schools will be the battleground of Islam in terms of having it more hours than it already has, and also more teachers with certain conservative streak in their Islamic approach. I think this is quite a fair concern. Number two, some of the civil society members have raised the issue of Hadith number 8, which is about war, in which in the Hadith it says that a Muslim is required to fight until Islam is established, and that all non-Muslims believe in God and the Prophet Muhammad. Now, I will make my comments on both concerns, not only from my own perspective or understanding of the Imam Nawawi's book, having read it when I was in USA at the age of, I think, 20 years old, but also I have been in discussions with the officials at the ministry, as well as with community leaders of other religion in a meeting held by the Ministry of Education quite recently. And so I will first of all deal with the issue isn't there too much Islam in the public school? Well, the first aspect that I would like to explain is that it is not actually an introduction of Imam Nawawi's 40 Hadith. It is actually an enhancement, meaning that according to the ministry's explanation, that there are already 11 hadith that has been discussed or has been taught in the pengajian Islam, and so they are only adding 24 other hadith to make it 35 hadith. So in the book of Imam Nawawi there are 42 hadith, thus there are only in total 35 hadith that will be taught in the modules of pengajian Islam, I presume under the topic of tafsir hadith, which is something which many Muslims have to learn. So that is the first clarification, that it is not an introduction or a addition. It's just an addition of 24 extra hadith to the years in the teaching of the students. And number two, the collection of Imam Nawawi's 40 Hadith is famous because it compiles some of the great Hadith to educate Muslims about values rather than much of Islamic education centered on rituals, on pilgrimage, on symbols, on recitation of Quran, all of which are highly necessary to be practicing Muslim. But none of these core education subjects deal with the question of values. And values are very important because Islam is not alone in its encouragement of good universal humanistic values, because even the Quran itself says that Islam as a Muslim, Muslim must also respect the other books, specifically the Bible as well as the Torah, because all of them represent a single line of revelation that comes from a single source. I also believe that Islam has relation to other great religions, but this is not a popular notion because Islam was born in the Saudi Arabia, and the region does not seem to have any influence on, say, Hinduism or Buddhism that is older than most of the religion like Islam and Christianity. So the issue here is about teaching values, and why teaching values is important, because then these values can be shared by other religions and other faiths, and it gives an impression to the Muslim students that they are also part of a larger humanity. And this is a critical point to be made, because most Muslims feel that they are isolated, meaning that they are having a siege mentality of us against them. And this is what is taught mainly when the concentration is only on rituals, on purification, on aspect of pilgrimage, aspect of even especially jihad. And this creates the idea of us against enemies, or us against the kafirs, and this is something which is going to destroy a nation as well as relationship in the global perspective. So I would like to give some examples of what the aspect of values that are contained in the Imam Nawawi's book. Let's say on Islamic manners, the Prophet Muhammad said, "Let him who believes in Allah and the last day speak good or keep silent, and let him who believes in Allah and the last day be generous to his neighbor, and let him who believes in Allah and the last day be generous to his guests." Now, if you look just at this incredible and important hadith, we see that you must speak good always. It doesn't mean that you kowtow to the leaders and all that, but you must always have adab. This is the term that we use, adab. Now, I am very sad to see a lot of Muslim leaders, like from certain political party, calling non-Muslims animals, calling non-Muslims corrupt, calling non-Muslims as so many other derogatory names. This is clearly against this hadith. You are not supposed to be doing that, and that is why many Muslims follow a certain so-called religious leaders who are also political leaders, because they don't know this hadith. And if this hadith is not introduced and emphasized and enhanced into their everyday life, then this is a very sad case indeed. In a meeting with the ministry, I asked specifically, how do you teach these values? Should you make certain ways in which that it is practiced? And they said yes, they're going to have assignment outside of school, so that the students can be used to the idea of multiculturalism and the idea of respecting others. So this is something good, but of course I have yet to see the modules in terms of its syllabus and assignment, but that is what was said in the meeting, and I was very pleased with that. The other thing the hadith said is that be generous to his neighbor or to your neighbor, and it does not say the neighbor is to be a Muslim, and it says that to be generous to his guests. And so this is again part of Islam. where if any one of you who are even non-Muslim, if you ask to be my guest, then I will have to entertain. It is obligatory for every Muslim to entertain the guest for 3 days. More than 3 days, it is called sadaqah. But you can ask the guest to leave on the third day, but within the 3 days, the guest must be treated well with food, shelter, and certain necessities of life. So this is the great tradition of Islam that has seen the construction of wakaf, that has seen the construction of khans, that have seen the construction of caravanserai, to accommodate the guests without having to pay anything, because these are endowed by great Muslims so that they can get the rewards of Allah in the hereafter. So the great wakaf or endowment is something that benefit all communities, like making endowment for the construction of a well, so that all can get water. Another hadith is about sadaqah. The Prophet said, every joint of a person must perform a charity each day that the sun rises. What are the charity? To judge justly between two people is a charity. To help a man with his mount, lifting him onto it or hoisting up his belongings onto it is a charity. And the good word is a charity. And every step that you take towards the prayer is a charity. And removing a harmful object from the road is a charity. Now, charity in Islam or sadaqah is not the same as zakat. Zakat is obligatory and mostly for Muslim, but charity is for all. Now, zakat, even though it's for Muslim, but there are cases where non-Muslims are entitled to zakat. So sadaqah is not about just giving money. It is giving help, any kind of help that community or other people benefit from. For instance, removing a harmful object from the road is a charity. So even Muslims who do not have money to give, they can do all this charity, and sometimes most of that charity is accepted by God, and or against a charity of those who are rich to give money, because it is easy for them to sign a check of about 1% of their income, rather than some person to actually help with their time, because time is the most precious of all. We don't have, we have a limited of it, and if even if you have as much money as you can, you still will not be able to buy any extra time. The other hadith is about being a traveler. Be in the world as though you were a stranger or a wayfarer. In the evening, do not expect to live until the morning, and in the morning, do not expect to live until the evening. Take advantage of your health before times of sickness, and take advantage of your life before your death. So these are the kinds of hadith that is general and universal in spirit, and that is why Muslims must understand that is more to Islam than just rituals, pilgrimage, performing jihad, as well as keeping purification and guarding about certain halal and haram issues. So these are the universal values that is necessary for the Muslims to be a good Muslim in society. Now, the third reason for the enhancement of the Imam Nawawi's module is to fight against the extremism that is now a part of society. As I said, I am not that worried about a few politicians making statements of extremist in nature, but I am worried that many young people, adult, elderly people support these extremist statements, and also educated people in universities have the same mindset. Now, that is why the teaching and discourse of this kind of hadith is absolutely necessary, and without it, Malaysia will plunge deeper and deeper into extremism. Now, I come now to the second part of the concern, which is the war hadith. Right? Number one, the war hadith is not included in the 35 selected hadith. So that settles the matter, because many non-Muslims are very frightened of the idea of militancy in Islam. Okay, that's settled. It is not taught. Number two, I just want to explain that in Islam there are aspects of war, because the Prophet Muhammad had 23 years to build up Islam, and he is or has established a nation which is in Medina, making agreement between different faiths, different tribes. He was involved in many political maneuverings and also battles, because battle or war is a part of the tribal life. There is no two ways about it in that time. Battles between tribes are commonplace. And instead of just having battles, in Islam it establishes a moral code of conduct, like when the Prophet said to the army of Islam, go forth and fight the enemy, but do not kill women, children, old people, and those who take shelters in houses of worship. Do not also destroy any fruit plants that gives out fruit. So these are some of the war conduct that is given in the Islamic tradition. Thirdly, many non-Muslims don't understand that you cannot take one verse of the Quran or one statement of a hadith like the ones that I have mentioned, containing certain subject matters like war or battles, on its own. It has to be interpreted within a larger discussion of other hadiths related to that. It then also has to be interpreted within the larger aspect of Islam, and how is the moral conduct of Islam. And finally, it also has to take into context the present situation, present relationship, present understanding, present culture, present lifestyle, and present issues before it is said to be cast in stone. This is much of interpretation is never cast in stone. So taking one hadith like the war hadith and saying that it applies in every single aspect is not correct. No one should be doing something as controversial and as difficult as that. Now, other hadiths like the ones that I mentioned, it has a sense of rightness, or something that has a spirit that is correct. So sometimes you can take it at face value because it doesn't have any aspect of extremism in it. So this is the concern about Imam Nawawi's book of 40 hadith, and I hope that Malaysians should understand this is a necessary war against the extremists. I say war simply because we have come to that level of how one group of Malays and Muslims seem to think that we are perpetually at war with non-Muslims. And so we must all together, both Malaysians and Muslims in Malaysia, who love Malaysia for what it was created for, to actually help to make the alternate Islam that is more in universal spirit of brotherhood, as mentioned by Siddiq Fadil, the brotherhood of citizenry and the brotherhood of mankind. This is what he has said, and this is something which I think needs to be enhanced in all of our understanding. So much of what Anwar Ibrahim and the government of unity is doing actually is to go to war against these kinds of perception of extremism and conservatism, and I'm doing my part, hopefully to actually make us win this battle of the mind and the heart towards creating a better Malaysia for all. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.